All right, so we're here for the red, white, and royal blue panel. And I do want to start with you, Casey, because, we wouldn't be here today if you hadn't written the book first. So I'd love to talk a little bit about when you first entered into this process of having this adapted. What were the parameters that you set for, what you felt like absolutely had to be carried over from your page to Matthew's page and then eventually the screen?
I mean, I think the ultimate make or break was that I wanted it to feel like a celebration. I wanted it to have that sort of like fireworks, confetti, sparkle to it. I wanted it to be really sincere and really funny and really unapologetically sweet. And to have that edge and have that humor and have like the dark jokes that Matthew is so good at writing and that I like to try to write too. But there were also a lot of non-negotiables. It was really important to me that Alex was Mexican, like he is in the book. It was really important to me that all of them have no internalized like hatred for themselves for being queer or anything like that. It's more of like the struggle with their circumstances rather than the struggle with themselves. I felt like that was an important part of the story. And I felt like Matthew got all of that like from jump, like completely.
Was there anything that you had to kill that was hard to kill?
Matthew, June.
Yeah, what was that process like? That was it a collaboration or was it like we're telling you we're killing it? Sorry.
Well, here's the example that I came to Sarah Schechter at one point early on in the adaptation process, and in the book, of course, Alex has a sister, and I'm working on this script, and I said to Sarah, like, I think we need to get rid of the sister, and I'm not finding any real estate for her that can't be fulfilled by Nora, and I said, look, you can either have like 2 roles for 2 young women in which neither have all that much to do, or you can have 1 role for a young woman in which she's got great scene after great scene after great scene. So Sarah was like, yeah, I hear your point. Don't know if Casey will go for it, but let's go talk to them. And so I remember getting on a call with Casey and I explained all that. And I was like, And
I think I took it pretty well.
I knew you took it pretty well, but I was nervous that you wouldn't. And then, luckily, I argued my case well, and yeah, and so the joke, of course, is when the movie came out, I think all the fans were like, "Where's June? Where's June?" And yeah, but I stand by my decision, and I actually think it's kind of great because there's that is very distinctly creates the world of the book and the world of the movie, and I'm very proud that people think that the movie is very faithful to the book. However, they're 2 very different things. And I hopefully now have created 2 separate things for people to enjoy.
It's a really good point. Can you also expand a little bit more, Matthew, on some of the decision-making behind some of the other condensing you had to do? Because there was a lot of montages, which I thought were really fun. But I also know from a production standpoint, you're spending a lot of work for like a very short amount of time on screen. So can you talk a little bit about what went into what you felt like had to be in those moments and why? And then Nicholas.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, the dirty little secret of a montage is just like, bits and pieces that were from scenes that got cut, The most intentional montage in the film was Alex campaigning in Texas. And that had always been a very intentional thing. And that was actually, I can't speak for Taylor, but that was actually a very fun day because we shot the bulk of it over a course of an afternoon in God, who knows where. But we just kind of like took the camera handheld and we just chased Taylor around. And I was like, okay, do this. You remember this, Taylor? There were these scripted things, and then we were actually ahead of time. And obviously I wasn't going to let Taylor go ahead of the end of call. And so, I was like, great, let's grab this, let's grab that. What do you want to do, Taylor? And he's like, oh, let's try this. And so by the end of the day, we had more footage than we possibly could use, but it was really wonderful because we had more footage than we could possibly use. And so I think that, I'm wary of writing too many montages. There's a lot. The other thing, of course, is the polo scene, which that is a great example of that was a larger 5 to 7 minute sequence with dialogue and scenes that we got to. That was where we officially meet Ellie's character, Princess Beatrice, and I was watching the film and I was just like, this is just going on too long, and I just want to get to the next sequence, which is Paris, and we could feel our desire to like get to it. And so my second editor on the project, Nate Moore, I just said to him, I'm like, can you just work on this, please? Can you just there's something about the sequence that's just bumming me out, and I don't know what it is, and can you play with it? And he went away for a weekend, actually, and he came back on a Monday, and he was like, I have something for you. It's insane. And I was like, we love insane. And he played for me an early version of what that montage ended up being. And I remember I was just like giggling throughout the whole thing because I was so happy. And so we lost 7 minutes out of the film right there. And it was actually really, really exciting. And that's a montage that's just cut together from scraps. But
I mean, it's fascinating, but like for Nicholas and Taylor, for both of you, I mean, we see the evolution of this relationship sped up because of a lot of these things are moving so quickly in these montages. What did that do? How did that affect how you guys worked together and how you were able to kind of wrap your head around their relationship? Whoever wants to go first.
I don't think anything felt sped up in the sort of performance of anything or the character building of anything at all. I mean, I felt like, we had those wonderful couple of weeks of pre-production where we laid the groundwork for all about the movie, and it just felt, Taylor and I obviously, like, we became friends, I think, pretty much instantaneously, but we just had so many like wonderful scenes even early on in the production process that felt very character building and grounding within the world, and yeah, it was very organic, to be honest. Yeah, I would say the only thing that, like, sort of, I guess this isn't really sped up, but the only thing that felt like we had to move at sort of breakneck speed was that sort of week we did after I got COVID. Oh. We sort of came back, and it was like the Kensington Palace sequence, it was the Red Room sequence, it was like all of these things within this week because we were in the same location. I think it was Bournemouth or something, somewhere in the countryside. And that was just like trying to like keep the energy up to get through and really like give respect to these really amazing important story points. But yeah, I don't know, Taylor, why don't you speak to that as well?
I think the biggest note that people give writers is show us, don't tell. And I think Matthew takes that and runs with it in this film because he provides so much incredible detail in the book that he couldn't fit into the film, that he was able to put into the montages to show, that 7 film that, yeah. I don't know, 80 pages of Casey's book. And I think when I watched it a few weeks ago and had that montage with Nick and I are reading back and forth to each other, I kind of got the chills because it kind of just strengthens the relationship that these two characters are building with one another. And because they go from enemies to lovers, you're just like, oh man, how quickly they put their guards down, understand each other, and are now trying to forge a path for them in this crazy circumstance of the void,
right.
First family.
And I mean, you both brought up a good point because Nicholas, you mentioned these are not the first scenes that you were filming. So, I mean, I'm sure even back to the chemistry read, you're building the relationship, you're building your on-screen and off-screen. Matthew, I believe you were quoted as saying you weren't sure about them as a pair until that chemistry read. So I wanted you guys to talk a little bit about what it was that you found in that moment that made it all click. And maybe I read a misquote. So if I did, please correct me.
No, just to tee them up, I will say that as we were looking at all the different combinations of people and putting them together, for whatever reason, it might have just been myopia. Nick and Taylor wasn't my go-to pairing, and so when we but I loved them both so much individually that we were like, well, let's see what happens. And I genuinely went into that chemistry read not at all certain what was going to happen. Mm. And after 5 minutes, I knew I found them.
So for you guys, Nick, Taylor, what do you feel like it was? What did you guys do? Did you work on it beforehand, or was it like a cold meet?
It was a cold meet. Who doesn't love cold meat? I'm kidding.
Not the right term. I'm aware of that.
I worked on it with my sister while, like, the night before I flew home, and I just knew how much I just knew the weight of the scenes. I knew the weight of the film and what it meant to people. And so going in with like the utmost respect and trying to find the truth in a character is just kind of all I did. And then being met halfway with Nick on the other end, doing the exact same thing. I think that's what you want in an acting partner, because a lot of the times your partner will phone it in. They will not be in it. They won't give you, their full, only at least 80% of their performance on their coverage, on your coverage. And I think from the beginning, we just had that mutual respect with one another, and we're grateful for the opportunity to bring this book to life. And I mean, that's where I'm set with that. I don't want to speak for you, Nick.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was interesting because, the process had been, long enough to sort of the point that like I was already on another project, and then like having to, do this wonderful chemistry test with Taylor sort of while doing that. And so I kind of almost lived with Henry for a little while already, in a sense. And so I was kind of starting to build him out. And obviously Alex is this huge component, this huge catalyst to his life. And I think you can never really gain like the full picture without that side of things. And so I think just like the sort of most gratifying things, I mean, you could tell like Taylor's like, he was confident already. He was very charming when you first meet him. And then this, the sort of the wit and the humor kind of come along, and we just had we had a great yes and with each other. And I think that's kind of that really is kind of the core of the movie. And I mean, yes, we have these very obviously emotional heights and moments, but that sort of chemistry and that sort of ping-ponginess really is the thing that I think gets people on side in a way, and the chemistry really. And I think, that sort of kind of was proved to be in the chemistry test, and then, those kind of days of pre-production, and it was fun. It was just really fun. And I think that's, what the movie is in so many ways. So, yeah.
And so because we're talking about casting, we have to talk about Ellen. I mean, she's the first female president in this world, which already I think is a high bar for a character, but then she's also so supportive of her son, which we need to see. And I'm glad that we see it. Were you pulling from inspiration in your own life for either side of her, or were you pulling from something specific that you've seen in the world?
Well, I mean, I pull from like the truism that love begets love, right? Like anger begets anger. I guess it was some old therapist said this to me when I was really young. But I think my approach to parenting has always been pretty similar to that. And I do think that modeling acceptance and love, which is what was in the story, is beautiful and necessary. So it was a privilege to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good point the book came out in 2019. So it's a few years ago now. We already, I think, are talking a little bit differently about different kinds of relationships, which I think there's been progress, which is great. One thing I wanted to talk to you both, Matthew and Casey, about is the idea of this film mostly, for the most part, showing support around them and not having characters that are, with the exception of the grandfather, of course, not having characters who are against their relationship. Can you talk a little bit about why do that? Why not show more conflict, excuse me.
So I'm from the Deep South. I went to conservative evangelical Christian school for 13 years. I had enough of that. I just had enough of it.
Yeah.
And so when I sat down to write, the world I wanted to live inside of when we talk about wish fulfillment, sometimes writing, exactly what Matthew was saying about that scene with Ellen and Alex, sometimes writing is wish fulfillment for the writer, and I think at that point in my life, I was like, right now, my ultimate dream is that I would come out and everyone would throw me a parade and it would be great and no one would get mad at me. And I think that was kind of what I was driving toward. But at the same time, I think it was just what felt like, I don't want to sound corny, but it kind of felt like what was needed at that moment in time and like just like the climate that we were in at that time. I started writing this book in early 2016 and I was like, I don't think I need to inject any more negativity into like our zeitgeist right now. And I wanted to write something that was more of an escape and more of like a balm. And I've talked to a lot of people who are people on the ground. They're like lawyers, they're advocates, they're activists. I've talked to literal Congress people who have told me that like they will spend a day doing like, the hardest work, the most important work that anyone can do. And then they will go home and they'll put their feet up and they'll read my book and they will get to like exhale for a second and be kind of replenished by that. And that's what I wanted to do. That was what I wanted to write. Matthew, do you want to? I do think the king comes around a little bit. Like I do,
but still, he's the one big piece of content.
No, for sure. Oh, it's the homosexuals. Yes.
I'm sorry. I still can't watch Stephen Fry do that moment without laughing. Yeah, I think too that, a lot of the narratives when I was growing up was about, when I was growing up, the narratives were all about this thing will kill you, being queer will kill you, either by disease or violence, and, there's no wonder there was a lot of, narratives about self-loathing and self-harm. And, I don't think it is to deny that still exists and that people they still struggle with their identity and they struggle with their belief that they are damaged. We haven't solved that. And human nature is such that we probably never will entirely solve it. But I also think that we saw so much of that. I saw so much of that growing up. I was sort of trained to believe that feeling was normal. Because there was no alternative to that. And so that feeling was normal. Okay. And it's good to be able to be told that what you're feeling is normal, but then you also we weren't given sort of the antidote to that. And the antidote to that is like hope. And so what I really responded to the book when I read it was that, Henry especially is just like, he's not struggling with, his feelings about who he is. He's struggling with his feelings about who he is in relation to the family that he's in, and Alex is not, at all really upset to sort of like to discover that he's, there's the line in the film. He's like, I can wrap my head around being into guys, but what I'm really confused about is being into Henry. I really love that it's less about this like queer panic and it's just about this, like, I can't be in love with my nemesis. That's like stupid. So I think that for me, just sort of like, that's the beginning of that alternative narrative, that Casey's describing. And I really wanted to be a part of telling that story. We will always need the other kind that I grew up with. The need for that will never go away, but we also need to give people these hopeful narratives in which people's problems aren't with themselves, but with the world.
Yeah. And yet, there was kind of a coming out moment for Alex with his mother. So Taylor and Uma, can you talk a little bit about filming that scene, and maybe Matthew, you as well, just the direction you gave in terms of, we know it's going to be supportive, but what do we feel we need to say and do, given everything that you just said about what it needs to be?
Yeah, I think commenting on your last question and this question, perfect, because I think the story showcases acceptance at the highest level, right? And I think people look up to the United States socially and as a place that sets trends. And this is the pinnacle of showcasing acceptance and love and compassion by world leaders. And I don't think many countries exhibit this in the real world. And that, as you know, trickles down all the way to the citizens of the country and all over the world. And so I feel like people may be sick of those coming out conversations with a parent that are just, you know, you can recite them in your sleep because you've seen so many of them. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, Matthew or Casey, but I feel like they really wanted it to be different. And it wasn't so much about the queerness that the Uma's character is worried about. It's about the ramifications of that queerness with an impending re-election and the future of his political career. And I think she leaves it in his hands. She gives him her motherly advice, her presidential advice, but then says, but at the end of the day, it's whatever you want to do.
I think she's unwavering in her love for her son. But she checks the box on, like, do you know how to protect your health? And like you would if your daughter or son were having sex with someone of the opposite sex, like, you know, like, are using a condom, don't get pregnant, don't get VD, right? Like, you know, and like, be careful. You know, those things cause uterine cancer down the line too, right? There's lots to think about. But, you know, so she checks those boxes. And I think but it's not totally without any sort of, like, it's not like a total fantasy in that there's no questioning, right? Like, she does say to him, a relationship like this will change your life forever. You know, like, really truly ask yourself, you know, because I think there's something nicely, elegantly balanced about that. And that is, she's, you know, to be young is to be confused. You know, to be young is also to explore and sometimes to size aside exactly what you want and be totally clear. And sometimes to have questions that maybe aren't all as clear. So she sort of asked him to be introspective of himself, but it's completely accepting of whatever he may choose. And it is very clear and very real, and probably at the bottom of most parents' minds if they aren't confused by the world they live in.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'd add, first of all, it was so much fun shooting that scene with the two of them. It was just, you know, that was one of my favorite days on set. But the response to that scene from people I've spoken to, strangers I've encountered, they really respond not only to a mother's reaction, a parental reaction to their child coming out, but there are also so many people have also said, "Well, I wish we had more politicians like her." Like I wish there were more Ellen Claremonts in the world. I wish that politicians in the public sphere could be as cool as Ellen is in private with her son. It was also very important that I set that scene in the Oval Office. Like there is something to me, I thought, sort of quietly political about staging a coming out scene in the Oval Office, and to have that heart to heart, because that heart to heart could have just as easily happened in their living room, in his bedroom, but that we set it at the seat of American and world power. That for me was just like quiet little act of political defiance that I wanted to perform in the film.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the things I love about the film is the balance between the romance and the politics of the story. This is one of the things I responded to in the book as well. But, you know, Casey used the word wish fulfillment earlier, and I'm curious, and this is for anyone who wants to take it as we wrap up, but I'm curious if you feel like doing this film, seeing the reaction to this film, if it is kind of changing what you hope to see both in rom-coms like this in the future, but also in politics in the future, whether it's on screen or off.
Can I just throw it back to, I love what, Casey, your answer was earlier about why not, like, coat this with self-loathing or credit, or why not make this darker? And when you said just like, because I've had enough of it, you know, like, and I think that that's such a beautiful thing, like the idea of like, why something more negative out there, put something positive and beautiful out there. And if she can see it, if they can be it, they can see it, they can be it. Right. So like, you know, I don't know. I think that you said that so beautifully, and it makes me very happy to be in your story. Oh my God, thank you so much. I mean, I think this is a feeling I had when I was writing the book, and I think, I don't want to speak for you, Matthew, but it's probably a feeling that you may have had when you were making the movie, where it was like, wow, if this can find its people, it's going to do really well with its people, you know, and not having a lot of expectations beyond that, and then being so surprised by how much bigger the category of its people was than I expected. I think we were all really blown away. I know I was blown away by the response to the book, and then again by the response to the movie and how much bigger it got than I ever anticipated. And I think that was really encouraging. It was really incredible. I mean, when I was trying to sell the book, I got 1,000,001 no's. Nobody wanted to publish it. Nobody thought it would sell. Nobody knew where to put it in the market. And I think also, I mean, it would, now we've got, like, look at that. Or it's but I mean, it's just in that time, that was like in 2018, and now we're in 2024, and this is what we're doing. I mean, I think just the way that we approach queer media in the last few years has changed so much. I mean, Matthew, I would love to hear more about what you think of that.
I mean, I wanted to make a film that was unapologetically hopeful and unapologetically romantic without sacrificing any complexity or sophistication. And I think that, well, you know, it's not fun to turn on the news or to open your, you know, New York Times app. It's just not, you know, it's, I think we said this to each other privately. We all kind of knew that the movie would do well based on how absurdly popular the book is. And I think all of us were really taken by surprise by how well the movie played, and like how personally people took the movie and how they took it to their hearts. And I think that there's a lot that you can say as a reason, the tremendous cast, the resources that Amazon put behind it. You know, I never went begging for money. I had what I needed to make this film. But I do think that what ultimately they're responding to was baked into the cake from the inception of the novel, which is it's a very hopeful story. It doesn't seem to matter to people that it's about largely privileged lives, either people born with privilege or people who have attained a degree of privilege. They don't care about that. They care about these good souls, these good hearts, going through some troubles and loving their way through it. And I think that is a pretty, I think that's clearly what people want to see right now. And I'm really grateful that we were able to deliver that.
Okay. So before we wrap up, I do want to ask Taylor and Nicholas one last question, because one of the things I think everything Matthew is hitting on, the fans have really rallied around this relationship and this couple. And I feel like a lot of people are just like watching it over and over again on Prime Video. So I'm going to make you pick your favorite, darling, the way I asked Casey about killing them earlier. Do you have a favorite relationship moment on screen? Either favorite because of the way you worked together shooting it, or favorite because of what it was saying and how it came out in the final product?
That's a good question. God, I mean, look, I'll always really love that Kensington Palace scene. It's just the scene I became like really familiar with through audition process, through pre-production rehearsal, and you know, it was one of those things as well. It's like we became so familiar with it to almost be able to like let it go as well, and sort of reapproach it. But I just think, you know, in terms of Taylor and I's work, I think we just felt very proud of that, and I think we felt a large amount of connectivity in that scene. It's a really important scene for the movie. You know, it's the relationship hinges on that scene in a lot of ways. So the stakes were high, and I think we delivered. And it was just like a long day. There was just something very despite the conflict, there's something very peaceful about the sort of filming process of that. I remember sort of Matthew coming in and he's, you know, despite his sort of very gregarious nature, he's very soft. I remember when you were giving notes and direction and on Taylor's coverage, on my coverage, I'll always have like a really visceral sort of memory of filming that scene.
I think a scene that probably complements, I guess it's like the kind of an inciting moment for that scene is them on the dock when Alex is so excited to be at his home in Texas with his new boyfriend, and they're just chatting about, Alex is saying about all the fun things they can now do when they come back for next summer. And that's when the story shifts and goes into Henry's point of view, and that, you know, he's ignoring Alex. And I think the coolest thing about this scene and the scene that Nicholas just brought up is that anybody can relate to those two scenes. You know, one person in the relationship loving too hard, and the other one not ready to accept that love, and then having the big blowout, but it ending on a positive note. I think everybody wants that to end on a positive note. Nobody wants to break up with their significant other. And like, even just talking about it, I'm just like so visceral just thinking about, like, it's from head to toe right now because we've all had that experience. And to see it on screen, you're heartbroken for Alex, and you're also heartbroken for Henry, because it's like so much unlearning that he has to do. And it's all about duty for him, right? And he's like, his life is the crown, and your mother is out of office in 4 years, and you can do whatever the heck you want. He's like, I am indebted and I'm chained to family for the rest of my life. And so I love those two scenes paired together.
Yeah. I will not unpack which one I was when you just said you see yourself in a perspective. That is for me to do in therapy later. But thank you all for being here and doing this panel. It was great to chat with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.